Hello and welcome to the Resilient Catholic Podcast. I am Lisa Rumpel, your host, and today on the podcast, I have a special guest, a friend from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, joining me, Desiree Nieckar. Desiree is a social worker, a singer and speaker, and has been a passionate public advocate for healthcare patients for the past 8 years. She was born and raised in rural Saskatchewan and now resides in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, where she works in the hospital as a medical social worker. Desiree's hobbies include singing, running, reading, and writing on the side. Her deep interests include learning more in the field of brain health, neuroplasticity, and leadership. So welcome, Desiree, to the podcast. It's so good to have you.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
And it's so great. My listeners, Desiree and I met because I started this podcast. So, our mutual friend Alana introduced us, or she sent a link to my podcast, maybe one of my earlier episodes during March or May or April or something like that. And we connected and she reached out and we struck up a friendship quite quickly and just, praying together over Facebook video chats and all three of us having chats together and connecting. And that's where I discovered that you have this incredible story of overcoming adversity. And that is why I'm so happy to have you on my podcast, especially because it's definitely my theme is resilience and overcoming great adversity. So now, and the beginning of your story is interesting too. So what led you to need brain surgery?
Well, at the age of 12, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. I had a concussion actually when I was age 3, which eventually caused the diagnosis of epilepsy at age 12. And so then from that, as the years were passing, the seizures were increasing. And eventually by age 16, my neurologist ended up stating, these seizures are intractable, meaning that they won't improve or diminish with medication, but rather they will instead increase with age. And so it was then needed or recommended for me to have brain surgery. And so the part is that it was a huge decision. And so initially at age 16, when asked, I was like, I don't really want to. I don't want to get out of
brain surgery. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Until I wanted to just pretty much I was actually hoping that maybe I can just keep going with my medication, that maybe it'll just dissipate these seizures. But then, and my mom also recommended that instead I decide and fully make this decision whether to have this surgery when I was an adult. So when I finished grade 12. So then it was 2 years later, my neurologist then asked me again if I wanted to have surgery. And over that length of time, those past 2 years, I kept thinking about it more and more. And I just noticed, this surgery, it's not totally what I would like, but I mean, these seizures that I've been going through, the challenges, I felt like my life has been really held back. Meaning, I wasn't able to have my license. I couldn't really socialize and go visiting with my family, with my friends on the weekend because I needed to stay at home and rest and rejuvenate for the following week. And so things like that. And so I wanted to accomplish many of my goals and dreams. And so I knew that was, that it was really eventually a need for me to just say yes, to jump and make that, make that jump. So.
Wow. And that is a difficult decision to come to. That's amazing that it took some time for you to decide. And so how did so you decided to have brain surgery, and then what what came next? Like, how did you prepare? Like, did God help you prepare for surgery during this time, or were you kind of, you know, on your own there?
Well, I guess first off, you know, when I initially decided at age 18 to go forward with this surgery, uh, you know, it was from it was a long wait list, like on average at the time. Uh, it was about 2 years that patients would have to wait for this brain surgery. And so then I began like really taking the time to prepare. I think more and more as days were passing, but it was especially in the fall of 2011 when I officially decided to have this surgery. Uh, it was I then took university off. I ended up going traveling. My friend and I we went to Mexico together, and then you know by January 2012 I ended up having one more medical appointment, and during that time, this lovely lady, her name is Diane, and and I remember during that meeting, I was like, as she was doing the EEG, um, you know, I had just kind of pleaded to her. I'm like, Diane, I really need this surgery. You know, like, is there any way that you can speed this up? And so then from that, it was just a few weeks later that I did get a call saying, you know, that your surgery is going to be on February 13th, 2012. So then for 3 weeks, I was able to prepare. And, you know, during that time, that was probably some of the most special times of my life in the sense that I, you know, I began really, really paying so much more attention to this every little moment and really embracing that time. And then a few days before my surgery, because my surgery ended up being on Monday, as February 13th was, but on Friday, I ended up going to adoration with my friends. And so that night, I ended up preparing for it. I'm like, you know, in all honesty, I don't know if I will survive from this surgery. Yeah, there's a huge success rate, and God, um, you know, he could allow me to pass, or he could allow me to continue with life. But then again, we don't know how successful it will be based on the stats, because I could even be that 1%, right? So so then I went to prepare for that, and I remember like just being there in the church and just praying with adoration. Um, I went to confession, and then a few minutes later, I'm just praying, and I'm like, God, you know, I don't know what your plan is, but I'm ready, like whatever it is. And that was probably one of the most beautiful times of my life. So then that following day, my my friends and I, we ended up going to watch a movie, like what went to the theater because there was that brand new movie that was just coming out where there was a couple, real life story actually, where the couple got into a collision, um, and and then the wife ended up having brain injury where she couldn't really remember anything from the past. And so wow, it was just like such an interesting time seeing that and thinking, wow, I wonder if any of that will be what I go through with my surgery. So that was really special. And then the following day was Sunday. So my family and I, we went to mass and then went to my favorite favorite breakfast place. And then just right afterwards, we spent the day together. We just like really embraced that time. And it was really, really special. And then that evening, we all just you know, just visited and had supper together. And then my family and I said, okay, good night. So everybody went to bed. And the crazy part is I was actually the one that stayed up the latest, I think. And so why was that? Well, there was a book, or there was a movie actually, that I ended up watching when I was quite young. And and man, I don't know how old I was, but I don't know, must have been around age 10. And so when I saw that movie, one lady, I think she was diagnosed with cancer. And so she began writing letters to her family members before she died. And I thought to myself, wow, I don't know. I still don't even know why exactly that stuck out to me, but I thought, man, if that ever happened to me one day, I would want to make sure that I write those letters to them,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that they have one way of saying something to cherish before that. So, anyways, I ended up staying up really late that night and I wrote a specific letter to one of my really good friends, to all of my siblings, and then to my parents. And so, I really prepared for it in case it was my last. And so, that was such a special time. I probably ended up staying up till after 1 o'clock or even later. But yeah, so I wrote that letter and then I sent, because it took me quite a bit of time to do this, I ended up sending the 2 letters on Facebook, and then I said to my friends and my siblings, okay, you can't read this until tomorrow morning. And then the letters I just gave to my parents just before I went into the surgery. And so then that day, I got up and there was such peace that I had. Um, I ended up walking into the hospital, and yeah, there was such peace with my mom and I just together. Yeah, and then we ended up waiting downstairs just before that surgery, and I gave each of my siblings a hug, and I told them, "Don't read this, and until I go in for the surgery, don't read this letter." And then I went in, and yeah, it was like an incredible peace. And I was just like, okay, God, whatever your plan is, I'm ready.
So beautiful. That's so amazing that, yeah, that you had this piece going in to a very scary type of surgery. Like I feel like it's the most scary surgery of all. I don't know, maybe heart surgery too, but like brain, like it's your brain, like it's, and that what a great idea. Like I think that's so beautiful that you had the thought to write a letter to each of your family members in case, because you don't know, there's risk involved in brain surgery, and you didn't know whether or not what would happen, and so you prepared so beautifully, mass and confession and prayers and letters to your family. I think that's such a beautiful way to prepare for something as big as that. That's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm so thankful that I, had that. And I think the grace to go into that surgery, yeah, with such
Mhm.
peace for sure.
Mhm. Was there anything else that helped you during that time? I know you're a singer, and I think you were a singer before your brain surgery happened, or you really love music. So, like, is there anything else, but besides prayer and all the preparing for surgery that helped?
No, I don't think there was much that really helped to prepare besides that. My family was huge in that for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah,
But, when it came to like afterwards, um, music was that definitely helped me through that healing journey. So after my surgery, I then had to be in the hospital for a total of a whole month. So once at one of the main hospitals for after surgery, and then 3 weeks in rehab. And there I was kind of relearning my speech and language, parts of that, strengthening that. I was quite weak because the surgery was on the left temporal lobe, and so then I was strengthening the right side of my body again. So that was walking and so with all of that, then that was something that really, I think, bothered me the most, is because I knew that I would be able to strengthen that piece physically. But when I was in the hospital, although I'm a social worker now and I love being in the hospitals to support patients, at the time as being a patient, I was going crazy. I was just
yeah,
like, okay, my driving force is to get better, get out of here. So then, and so then I was like working day in and day out to improve my speech and language and anything so that all of those staff that were supporting me would be saying, okay, she's good to go sooner than later. So anyways, with all of that, once I was out of the hospital, then with rehab, and I had practiced my speech and language and everything, I then went home for a whole month to spend time with my family, just to get more support. And so while there, I ended up just meeting with one of my parents' neighbors. And so she had read this book called Gabby. And so it's just the true story of Gabrielle Giffords healing after she was shot. And so when all that happened, and I was reading this book, it was so interesting because I ended up highlighting like so many times things that stood out. And one piece that really did is that she and her mom began singing together, and that helped her with her speech and language and develop that again.
Wow. Yeah.
So then I thought to myself, wow, like I haven't sang in quite a few years since high school. And so I then thought, I'm going to start singing again, and to really start strengthening my speech and language, and really help that fluent me become fluent again. And so I started singing, and ever since, it's a beautiful joy that I have, and I love continuing with that. And now today, as a social worker, I use music not only as a way for me to debrief after work, but then also I've been using music in my practice as well as a source of therapy for patients in the hospital.
That's so wonderful. Yeah, music is very powerful at healing, uh, like music therapy is a huge thing, and just there's that power of connection, and all the emotions that you can connect to in a song, and lyrics that are beautiful, and so that's and I remember hearing, I think you shared a story that you were at World Youth Day in like Poland, or and then you got invited to sing on stage during a prayer service.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've been able to use this beautiful gift of singing in many different ways. And like you sing at your church, not now as much now because of COVID and the pandemic, but that you've been able to use this gift, and isn't like you came through such a hardship, like having to relearn how to talk and how to move your body, and look at you now, like it's incredible. You've made it through this difficult path, and I'm sure there's so much healing that still goes on, like even for my life, living with a mental illness, bipolar disorder, that there is still healing that takes place. And for me too, it's acceptance again. It's like, okay, this is a lifelong illness for me, this is chronic, it's something I'll always have, but that won't always be depressed or sad, that I won't always be languishing, that there's times of flourishing too, and that it kind of goes in waves. And so I'm sure, like for you too, I'm sure because you've started writing about it, that brings healing to your journey.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Like that writing piece is, yeah, definitely. And that whole combination, I think. Yeah.
Is there anything you would tell someone if they were getting ready either to decide to have brain surgery, or they were already going to be going through brain surgery? What would you tell them? Like what would be something you would want to say to someone who's going to go through with that extraordinary surgery?
Mm-hmm. I think for one, if a person is really uncertain and really not sure what to do,
Mm-hmm.
definitely turn to different supports that you have and connect with them. Uh, and also to kind of weigh the pros and cons. But if it seems like there's more worry within all of that, even seeing, thinking back and seeing yourself like 30 years from now, and seeing, how would I take that? Um, if I had the surgery or if I didn't, and and I think just us stepping back kind of in a different way to think about that. And then secondly, or thirdly, you know, even just if it is decided to have this surgery, then you know, really cherish the moments to prepare for this surgery so that you go in there with as much peace and calm and minimal anxiety as possible. Because I'll be honest with you, I think that if I didn't have as much, or if I hadn't really spent the time to prepare for this, I probably would not have had the peace that I did. Um, and so that is really important. And with all of that, you know, if God is in your life, then yeah, invite him to be there with you, and, and with you before, during, and after the surgery. And if God is not a part of your life, then you're more than welcome, like, to ask him, to invite him, uh, to be present with you and to really comfort you and strengthen you during that time. And yeah, because you just never know uh, what he can do.
Like, I am so amazed that, like, yes, like, you've healed from this brain surgery. You do your work and sing and do all these things. You know, that's such a blessing. You didn't know what the outcome would be. So like, how, like, it's almost like you have a second life. Like, do you have any seizures anymore, or is that all gone now?
Yeah. So now it's pretty incredible. Like, uh, almost so February 2021, it'll be 9 years already. And, you know, I'm very thankful for that because, you know, in all honesty, uh, before I had my surgery, I was in university at the time, and always knew that I wanted to be a social worker. I actually never knew what I wanted to do within my social work. Um, but right after, actually, when I was in therapy, probably my second or third week in therapy, all of a sudden a social worker came into my room, and she was like, trying to talk to mom, and try to figure out what resources would be helpful when I discharge and stuff. And I thought to myself, wow, how cool would that be to support patients that have went through something very similar to what I went through. And so, and I'm forever grateful for that surgery because God allowed me to heal. He allowed me to have my license, to eventually get my bachelor of social work degree. And so it's it's allowing me to really accomplish so many of the dreams that I felt have been deeply within my soul to do and accomplish, and not just accomplish, but rather to use that to serve and help others as they are going through such difficulties. And so my motive within my work on a daily basis is to really help diminish the suffering that others are facing. And so if I can just be present with them and to support them, and I think especially like in those moments when I've supported patients that have went through a stroke, or others that have went through brain surgery or a brain injury, and they're just relearning their speech and having difficulty kind of on one part of their body, I'm like, wow, I don't say this, but I have such empathy, which gives me that patience to be present with them because I have a glimpse of what they've went through.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's why it gives me such passion in what I do. And yeah, and so I'm just forever grateful for what God has done for me. And he continues to open up doors. And so I know when I ended up going to Poland to for World Youth Day, Poland ended up giving us all the opportunity to post our testimony on a website called mystory.me. And so I ended up posting my testimony on there. And yeah, and so on the very bottom, uh, that piece of that Leah, or a quote from Leah Duro actually always stands out to me, that sometimes the greatest pain will be the launch pad to your greatest calling.
That's beautiful. It's so true.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine recently say to me, when we went for a coffee, she said, Lisa, right, so you might feel like bipolar disorder or having, epilepsy or whatever illness, is a curse, but it's actually your blessing. And really coming to feel that, to know that even though, because I've been experiencing lately, some illness has been popping up, not the return of the illness, but close to being almost a relapse of mental illness. And it's been distressing, but at the same time, it's kind of it's making me realize, it just makes me realize how weak I am, but how strong God is, and how I'm so dependent on him for everything, for everything. And just to know that even though I may go through suffering, maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's a day, or maybe it's longer, but that there is an end to this suffering, and that God is always with me. He never abandons me. And he's always been with you. He's always blessing you. And that he has great plans for our lives, for everyone's life. Like all of you, all of the listeners, God has great plans for your life, and plans for the full. He didn't say life would be easy, but he said you will have joy, and your joy will be complete. And I really hold on to that. And I see that, in your life, and in what you've come through, what you've experienced, you really have this joy deep inside you that can't be taken away, because you've experienced this deep peace and this knowledge that you are loved and you're being taken care of. And it's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah. I'm just so grateful that we could chat here on the podcast today and share this story, this wonderful story that God really does bring healing, that no circumstance, no illness is hopeless. Nothing is hopeless, because we have a God who is great and can do great things. And so, Desiree, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on to the podcast and sharing with the listeners your story that is so it's still so raw and so it's so beautiful, because it's a story of hope and of healing. And I wish you all the best in all your goals and dreams that you have. And I know that you're just a bright shining star that just you're going to keep going and keep sharing your story, because it's beautiful and powerful.
Thanks, Lisa.
So thank you for being on the podcast, and I hope we have another chance to have a conversation about all your next adventures, writing and your social work that you're doing. So I will say goodbye for now, but chat with you soon and talk to you later. Bye.